Hey everybody, and welcome to Grimm's This Ain't Your Mama's Army Book Review, Army Book Review for the Infernal Dwarves. I am Grimbold Blackhammer, and with the release of this year's balance patch, now seems like the perfect time to talk about all the glory of the Infernal Dwarves and how things in their book are now looking. This won't be the usual Army book review that you may be used to from listening to podcasts or YouTube or whatnot, because I'm not going to cover a whole lot about the Army's rules. I'm going to assume that you have read the book and that you know the rules, or that you are capable of picking up the book and looking things up yourself. What I am going to talk about is price. I want to talk about where to put your points to get a good return on investment. When we are putting together a competitive list, I want to talk about what's good, what's not so good, and the things we might want to avoid. Way back in the day when I was a younger, more handsome man and played Warhammer Fantasy Battles, I realized that I could put points into a particular playstyle, like a gunline, for example, but wasn't convinced that I was making the best use of my points. Just because I could do something didn't mean the army was good at it. So I decided to figure out what was the best, most efficient way to spend my points to get the most value for my points. Now, I know that Warhammer is dead and gone, but um, T9A had its roots in that game. So what I learned there, it was fairly straightforward actually to transfer to the Ninth Age. So, for example, here we have two mages. Both have channel 1, they both draw from the same pile of flux cards, they both have the same number of spells. So if I were to ask you which mage is better, you'd probably answer they're about the same. But if I told you that the mage on the left only costs half of what the mage on the right cost, now who would you say is the better mage? Or here are two warriors with great weapons. Let's say they have exactly the same stats, except one warrior has an agility of 4 and the other has an agility of 2. Do you think one of those warriors should pay less for their great weapon than the other? These are the kind of questions that led me to compare units against each other in an effort to figure out how much things should actually cost so I could figure out who was overpaying for something and who was underpaying for stuff. I think I'm like the average player. I go to a few tournaments every year. I like to win when I play. I still play for fun. But when I put together a list, I put some thought and effort into it. And I just want to make sure that when I put my points into something, I'm getting a good value for what I want to play with. Here's the stat line of a schlubby human or goblin or peasant or whatever. Discipline 7, stats of 3 across the board with no equipment other than a hand weapon. Nothing but a dirty old loincloth. It's pretty well established that light armor is a 1-point upgrade, heavy armor is a 2-point upgrade, and a shield that gives 1 point of armor is also a 1-point upgrade, unless it gives parry, in which case it's a 2-point upgrade. Or if a model has 2 hit points, he's essentially getting twice as much use out of that shield or armor, so you double the price. I mean, this isn't rocket science to figure this stuff out. I found that 2 units that were exactly the same except for maybe a point of strength, and then found out the price for 1 point of strength is, hey, big surprise, 1 point. And so on it went. I had to figure out the cost of fear and stubborn and magic resistance and stomp attacks, and it took a lot of comparisons and finding units and pricing things up and down and how it all came together. But 15 years on, I'm pretty confident in my grim math to figure out what's worth paying for and what's not worth paying for. I say all this with one caveat. This system is not how the Ninth Age prices their army books, and it absolutely should not be. As a player, my concerns revolve around getting value from my points and not from playability or internal balance or external balance or whatever else. So at no time will I say the price of something in the books is wrong. The prices are in the books are priced the way they are for a variety of reasons that I, as a player, don't really care about. What I do care about is getting a good bang for my buck. So I'm going to run you through the math on just a couple of entries so you don't think I'm pulling numbers out of my butt. This is solely based on comparisons between units to get actual prices of abilities and upgrades. So here is the cost of a basic warrior. The stats are a little different from a baseline human. It's got a different advance in March, but it's not any better. If you add 4 and 8 together, you get 12. Divided by 3, you get 4. You add 3 and 9 together, you divide it by 3, you get 4. It's different. It's just not any better or any worse. The warrior has 2 better discipline. That's worth 2 points. They both have 1 hit point. Defense and offense, that was split by from weapon skill by the 9th Age a couple of years ago, but it didn't affect the price. So an average of those determines how much that costs. The warrior has 1 more resilience. It has armor 3. It has a conditional 5+ Aegis save, and on and on and on. It ends up being worth 13 points. The Infernal Warrior also has a special rule called Infernal Brand, which is actually pretty cool. And when you break it down, it's worth 3 points. So an Infernal Warrior costs a total of 16 points. However, if you were to buy a max-sized unit and break that down per cost of model, the book is only charging you 11.25 points per model. I think, with simple math, they're worth 16 points a model. So you are essentially buying a model at 30% off. You're only paying 70%. That's why it's green, and that's why it's a good deal. That's all this really is. Breaking down what's a good deal and what's not a good deal. Our warrior has the option to buy a shield. A shield gives 1 point of armor and parry. Hence, those are each worth 1 point each. Hence, the price is 2 points. They charge 2 points. You're paying the right amount. It's a 100% of what you get. So that is also green. Blunderbusses, on the other hand, were a surprise. I thought they were overcosted for what you get. This is opinion. I think that the 9th Age overvalues shooting. It's been a long, long time since anyone has ever been magicked off the board, shot off the board. Movement has completely dominated an enemy, so they couldn't get into close combat with anything. The 9th Age limits a lot of that stuff, and in limiting shooting, I think they overvalue it. So they don't let you take a whole lot of it, and what they do, they make expensive. But in this case, a blunderbuss mathematically is worth 8 points, but they're only charging 6. Why is it worth 8? You take a standard bow, it's strength 3, it's got volley fire, and I think everybody knows a bow is cost 3 points. On just a regular schlub, a bow is 3 points. You strip off volley fire, now it's worth 2 points. A blunderbuss only has 12 inches, so that reduces the cost, but it's got a slew of other rules that make it better. That pushes it all the way up to 8 points. The book is only charging 6 points. I know people think it's overcosted, and it kind of feels that way at times, but mathematically, it's actually worth 8, so it's a pretty good deal. So you have to weigh that in your own head. I know what I value. Maybe I'm off by a point here or there. Maybe it's actually worth 9 points. Maybe it's only worth 7 and it's actually priced correctly. I don't know. I think it's worth 8 points. The math says it's worth 8 points. That's what I'm going with. So it's actually a deal. So consider that when you are picking your core units. Infernal Warriors are a deal. Blunderbusses are a deal. Good bang for your buck. Ziggurat Warriors, they're a little bit overpriced. They get a great weapon. They fight in an extra rank. Technically, that's worth 3 points. They charge 5 for it. Maybe that's a balancing cost. It's not going to break that extra 2 points. It's not going to break your budget in any way, or it shouldn't. So it can be worth it. So I did mark it as yellow, but that's really a preference thing. Overall, Infernal Warriors, a pretty solid choice to start off in your army. Citadel Guard, the Infernal Warriors' big brother, slightly better stats. Their stats rock in at 16 points. Infernal Brand is still worth 3 on them, and so they are worth a total of 19 points. They only charge 17 points per model in the book, so you're actually only paying 89%. But wait, there's more. People often forget Citadel Guard have the cost of a pistol baked into their cost, so they're actually worth 22 points per model. A pistol is a 3-point upgrade, but they're still only charging 17 points per model, so they are costing 77% of what they should actually cost. That is a pretty good deal. I know a lot of people think they're overcosted. I really don't. I get great results from this unit. You can buy a pistol and a spear for 3 points. That is worth 3 points, so that's green. I charge it at it gets a 100% value. And then things kind of go off the rails a little bit with the Flintlock Axe. The Flintlock Axe is charged 7 points, which is huge, vastly overvalued for what I think it's worth. The math says it's worth 2 points. That's 350% difference. I'm going to talk a little bit about why there's such a massive price difference. When Citadel Guard take a Flintlock Axe, they lose their shield, so that's minus 1 point of armor. Because they lose the shield, they lose parry, that's minus another point of armor. So you're already down 2 points. But it gives you plus 1 strength, it's worth a point, plus 6 inches of range, plus 1 point. It shoots in an extra rank. Again, if plus 1 attack is worth 2 points, conditional plus 1 attack is only worth 1 point. In this case, you have to have the extra rank, it's conditional, it's only worth half the value, plus 1 point. But a Flintlock Axe does hit 1 better. So that's also plus 1 point. So we come for a grand total of 2 points. Now they've already got a pistol, which is already a strength 4 AP2 shot. So they want essentially 5 points for, what, 6 inches of range? No, that's a terrible deal any way you cut it. So Citadel Guard, good. Pistol and Spear, good. Flintlock Axe, not so good. Vassal Levies, also known as Hobgoblins to you old guys like me. They have kind of garbagey stats, but their baseline stats rock in at 5 points per model. They're insignificant and they don't cause panic, which we like. They have light armor. They have the oil flasks rule, which oddly enough doesn't really benefit the Vassal Levies very much. That's 1 point. And they have paired weapons baked in for a total cost of 10 points. The book lists them, a max-sized unit per model is 5.75 points, which means you're only paying 58% of their cost for a giant unit. If I saw things in stores that were actually 58% off, I would buy a lot of them. You can't go wrong with Vassal Levies. They can easily get the Discipline 9 of a dwarf. They're useful, they're cheap, they're not terribly effective, nor are they terribly ineffective. It's easy for them to bring ranks. You clip them in on a combat, they swing first, they add an oil token to something, and suddenly if your dwarves have flaming weapons, they're re-rolling to wound. There's nothing bad you can really say about Vassal Levies. They're fun, they're cheap, they're a great value. You can have up to 40 of them for 230 points. Oh my god, my elves have chaff units that are worth about that amount, and 40 points is a lot of bodies to go through. They score. Yeah, great little unit. You could buy them a shield. Swapping out paired weapons for a shield that gives parry should be an even swap. The book wants to charge you 1 point for it. Again, it's 1 point, so maybe 40 points for the whole unit. I marked it in orange instead of yellow, but it is overpriced. Spear and Shield, undercosted. You only pay for 50% of the cost as opposed to doubling of what it should cost. So I love Spear and Shield. I get good mileage out of that. And no unit of cavalry wants to charge into a big unit of Vassal Levies with spears and shields. Bows are a standard 3 points, so overall, great little value for this unit. Shackled Slaves are almost like our Vassal's ugly cousins. They come in at 7 points, and they're not quite as good. Maximum unit size is 40. You can get a big unit of them for 40 points, which is not too terrible. And the book only lists them at 5 points. So you're actually getting them about 30% off. That's not bad. I personally prefer Vassals just because they're a little more useful. I think just that little pip of armor and the ability to give them bows or shields or the oil rule, whatever it is. My own personal preference are the Vassals, but Shackled Slaves are not a terrible unit, especially when you consider they're 30% off. I think their Enslaved Porters rules is a giant waste of time and points. If you do the math on it, they can make a nearby unit count as in soft cover. Well, the number of missile weapons out there that ignore cover is silly, and if you give them paired weapons, which are technically overpriced by a point, a nearby dwarf unit can reroll ones. Okay, my dwarf unit has 5 wide, 10 attacks. Well, let's say it's 6 wide and 12 attacks for easy math. That means I've rolled 2 ones. I reroll those. One of them I'm probably hitting on 4, so one of them is a hit and one's a miss. So their special rule gave me 1 extra hit. I'm not writing home about that one. And I'm not expecting Shackled Slaves to really do any damage. So paired weapons are a wash off for me, or a write off for me. I'm not going to buy those. With shields, yeah, they're okay. So solid unit, but again, not my first choice. And that's your core. So let's move into the special section of the army book. And our first contender are the Kadim Incarnates. 6 models is the biggest unit you can bring, and that costs a mid-size 580 points. So they're not cheap. Their stat lines is worth 69 points. They have insignificant, fear, fearless, swift stride, cannot be stomped. Yes, that's worth something. They do stomp, they have volcanic embrace, and they're supernal for a grand total of 114 points. The book, if you break them down per model at a max base size of 6, they are only worth 97 points per model. That is 85% off. I know that people say that, I think this might even be the number one unit people say it's overpriced. No, you can't buy these. They cost way too much. Really? I don't think they are. I think they're actually pretty cheap. And they do some work. Yes, they're a little bit niche. You throw these in front of a bunch of elves and they're just going to get cut down and turned into paste. That's just an ugly mess nobody wants to see. Against a lot of other stuff, whether it's chaffy, humany, squishy models that there's just lots of, like rats. They're great. Flank unit, they're great. Knights, they're great. They're a solid unit. They've got good movement. They've got good stats. They're again very easy to get up to discipline 9. They're supernal. I really like this unit. So for those of you who on the forums like to give this unit a lot of hate, I hope you reconsider them. I think they're actually pretty good. And again, I think they're underpriced by 15%. So they're green. I price them at 85% and give them a second look. So if you take a Kadim, make them pull a chariot and throw 2 guys in the back, you get a Kadim Chariot. I didn't do all the math breaking this one down because this just had a ton of special rules and the mount and this and that and the other. So forgive me for being a little bit brief on this one, but the baseline stats on the chariot, I use an Orc Chariot as the base cost. This one comes in at 200 points for the stats, and then its special rules rock in at 53 points. And now that I think about it, when I did the math on this one, I don't even think I counted the mount on this one for his attacks, so it might be worth a little bit more than 253 points. Regardless, though, it's priced at 235. I clock it in at 253 or higher because apparently I might have actually forgot something. So it's either well priced or it's underpriced, depending on how bad my own personal math skills were. They don't have great armor, but with a ward save, they actually do pretty well. Everybody likes a chariot. It runs in, it smashes things, and it's got a little bit of staying power. Some people like them, some people really don't like them. I've had mixed results with them, but I can say that about just about every chariot. So for 235 points, they're not bad. They definitely fill a role. You can get them. They come with paired weapons, and you can give them great weapons. They want to charge 15 points for the great weapons. They're actually worth 0. The riders all have 2 attacks. Swapping great weapons for the paired weapons actually works out to completely even swap. 15 points is just 15 points. I mean, it's not going to break. Again, it's one of those cases where it's not going to break your army, but it is stupidly overpriced. It should just be a straight 0-point swap over. So great weapons are an option, but I personally, I think I just prefer paired weapons on the riders of the chariot. Overall, solid unit, can give good performance, can chaff, can do lots of those things that chariots do. That's why we like them. So I give it a green and something you can consider for your army. Enter the Immortals. This unit is probably in contention for being one of the #1 things people say is overpriced and they don't like. Doing the math, they've got good stats. They've got Bodyguard, Fear, Infernal Brand, Parry, Battle Focus. They come with a built-in great weapon or spear. I used to use Immortals almost exclusively in every one of my armies, and they always were accompanying my Overlord, and they'd walk through the battle. They would get engaged by something big, and their special skill in this world was they would lose. They would lose very, very slowly, but you would have to kill them almost down to the man every single time. But their special skill is they would just lose, and that can be a useful skill at times. But a maximum unit size of 30 models costs 650 points. You throw in an Overlord and a banner, you're probably talking 1,100 points. That's a big chunk of your army that you know you're going to lose. I have not tried these new stats. Now that they have parry and battle focus, that's pretty solid, at least on paper in my head. I want to give these guys a try. I was starting to write them off despite my absolute love for them. But now that they've got a little bit more combat punch, which is what they were desperately lacking before, I'm hoping that they might be better. I can't complain about the price. If you break them down, a max size unit divided by 30 is 21.67 points per model. That's, again, 30% off. Who's going to complain about 30% off anything? And I like the idea that you can give them a spear. They're fighting in an extra rank. Their native strength 4 AP1, so now you're talking AP2, AP3 when they get charged. They seem like the whole package on paper. How they stand up to things in the battlefield, again, I need to do some play testing to figure it out, but I like what they look like on paper. You can buy them an Infernal Weapon. The world thinks that they should cost 2 points for those Infernal Weapons. I think that they should not. I think that should cost 0 points, and so it's 200 points too much. It's also probably not the absolute best option for them because they've got parry. I think a spear to let them fight in an extra rank, to give them that extra little bit of punch, or great weapons. They're already swinging last. Great weapons to help chop down the enemy. I think those are the 2 ways to go. I've used Infernal Weapons in the past, but again, that was with when they had different special rules and they just lost all the time. So you can try an Infernal Weapon. My advice would be Great Weapon or Spear, but overall, I don't think they're overpriced. I think they're actually underpriced. I think they're a downright bargain at almost 30% off. So consider them, and if you've got feedback on them, please put it up in the forums so I know what I'm looking at. Disciples of Lugar. This is an odd unit. It's almost like the weird cousins of the Infernal Dwarves. Their base stats are good. They're worth 21 points, but and I'm not showing all the math again on this one because they've got just a ton of special rules. But their special rules, they've got so many of them. The price on this unit is 43 points, but the list price on it is only 19.8 points per model that you're paying. You're only paying 46% of what these guys are actually worth on the battlefield. That's pretty awesome. A max size unit is almost 600 points. It'll be over 600 once you add command and banners and whatever doodads you feel like tacking onto the unit. But these are vastly underpriced, and I think the real reason is not a lot of people have these models to field, so they don't get fielded a lot, so they get priced down for whatever reason. You can't really go wrong with these guys. They have reasonable damage output. They're reasonably durable with a 5-up Aegis save, but they've got the weird rule that they've got magic resistance 2, and they give that magic resistance to whatever enemy they're in base contact with. And that has screwed up so many of my opponent's magic phases. They try and trickle out dice. They want to just 2 dice things, and suddenly, what do you mean that costs 2 points more to cast? Oh, suddenly I've got to throw 3 dice at something. And their regular rhythm for their magic phase goes completely bust. You combine that with a crystal ball, and it makes their magic phase go to pot, while you've got a solid unit, whether they're casting an aura spell or they need to buff up the unit that the Lugars are fighting with. I think this is just a great solid unit, and they're dirt cheap. They come with paired weapons. You can give them great weapons. Again, they're overcosted because of how much paired weapons at strength 4 cost versus great weapons, but not by too much, so it doesn't make it totally unappealing. If you haven't tried this unit out, try this unit out. They're not amazing. They're not going to dominate the game or anything, but they're so useful. They fill a great niche, and I really like these guys. Taurukh Enforcers, another unit where I don't think a lot of people have these models. You don't see them on the table nearly as often as I would like. Their baseline stats are 22. They have an Infernal Brand. They can't be stomped. They have armor. They do an impact hit. They come with paired weapons baked into their cost. They should cost 39 points. You're only charged 31, so you're only paying 80%. One other reason why you might not see them is because while the unit itself is priced pretty well, the weapon options are not. With a blunderbuss, they're okay, but the maximum unit size is 12, so you're not really going to be spamming a whole lot of these, and blunderbusses hitting on 5s, you kind of need more blunderbusses to actually have a bigger impact. I think that's one of the limiting values of them. Their weapon costs, I think, are total garbage, but I have tried these guys. I have got some mileage out of these guys, and getting some speed into your list definitely helps. So try them, play with them. If they suit your play style, that's terrific. Some people leave them at home. I can't really blame them. But yeah, play with them, see what you think. If you find something that really, really works well for them, if you put a character with them and you find they're super effective, please let me know. I would love to love these guys a little bit more. And speaking of love, this is everyone's favorite unit. This is the unit that everyone's fielding right now. They can come in a unit with a maximum size of 6 for 600 points. They have good stats, they have good rules, they have bodyguard, they're tough, they're fast, they can fight, they're durable, they kind of do it all. That's why everyone likes them. And they went up in price, which makes people sad. I think they're worth 93 points, but the book thinks they're worth almost 100 points, 99 points. So you're still getting them at a little bit of a bargain for what they're worth. There are some really good bargains that I've talked about already, which makes these things seem overcosted, but really they're not. You're just getting what you're paying for, and that still makes them a good deal. If you've got them in your army and you use them, great, keep using them. They're still going to do work. Yes, you're paying a little bit more for them, but you're only paying what you really should pay. Every book has things that are overcosted or undercosted. These are priced basically correctly. So I hope people continue to love them. They're really fun models. They're really fun to use on the table. They do good things, and they really change the way your army plays because they add speed, which the army severely lacks, except for in a few units. So you can give them shields. Shields should be a 2-point upgrade, but because these models have 3 hit points, it's a 6-point upgrade. Paired weapons are a 6-point upgrade, so they should be free. The book wants to charge you 10 points. I think that's garbage, so I would not buy shields. Great weapons also look great, and infernal weapons are a little bit overcosted. They are still a solid choice, still something I would personally stay away from. I like them with paired weapons. They're really reliable. I like them even less with great weapons just because I have to pay for it. With paired weapons, they're fast and they still do really good damage. So pick your poison, but still a solid unit. Vassal Cavalry, hands down the most undervalued unit in the book. We saw a lot of different iterations with these. They used to give lots of flaming tokens, then they gave less flaming tokens, then they got lances, then they lost this, then they got that. The final version has bows and lances, is fast, has a little bit of armor. It does a little bit of everything. It does a little bit of everything fairly well and fairly cheaply, but they only price it at 21 points a model, and it's worth 65. You're paying 33% of what they're actually worth. 15 models is 320 points. Now, points are always tight when you're making your armies, or at least an Infernal Dwarf army, and these guys don't always make my list. I love them, but they just, sometimes I don't have the points to spare for them to be chaff or whatever it is I want them to do. They are a solid unit, a great unit. Play with them, use them. You'll get great mileage out of them, literally, because they're so fast. But I have a hard time finding space for them sometimes, so they don't make it in every time. Really great unit. Play with them. If you just want them to drop oil tokens on things, they're good for that. Again, I have nothing bad to say about them. I think because of public perception, they got priced really low, so give them a try. And then we swing to the complete opposite direction and we go to Gunnery Teams. I don't have good math on these. They're such a different kind of unit. There's not much to compare them to. So instead of having good numbers to give you, I'm just going to tell you why I think they're garbage. And I'm sorry, I know the design team put tons of work into trying to make these good, but I don't think I'll ever field one. Tying them to a unit makes them a burden. They make the unit that they go into weaker in close combat, and the number of times that I've broken by 1 and ran, I've lost count. So making my unit weak, paying points to make my unit weaker, it just seems like a bad deal to me. Except for the naphtha thrower, the unit can only move 3 inches and still shoot. I don't want to limit my unit. Their range is not great, and they still use up precious fires of industry points that I really think can be better spent elsewhere. They are cheap. They've got that going for them. They're only 155 points. Some people say, oh, it makes your unit more useful and it can give it stuff to do. Well, you know what else would give my unit stuff to do? Not giving it a gunnery team and using a full piece of artillery that has good range and can pound things into the ground. Giving my unit time to do whatever it actually wants to do. So maybe in the hands of a better player than me, because I'm an average player, maybe in the hands of a really skilled player, these are amazing. They do good work and they devastate units. I'm not that guy. I don't think a lot of other people are that guy. Try them, and if you think they're amazing, please let me know. Maybe I'm using them wrong, but I do not like this entry in any way, shape, or form. My gunnery teams are now sitting on the shelf collecting dust, and I probably need to paint sad faces on all of their faces because they're all very sad. Infernal Artillery. These have gone through many generations as well, and what we've finally settled on is a naphtha thrower, which is almost identical to a Dwarven Holds Flame Cannon, and they're both priced roughly the same, so I'm going to give that one a thumbs up and say it's okay. Our Titan Mortar is very comparable to a Dwarven Holds Catapult. A little bit more armor on one, a little bit more attacks on the other or something. The differences are minimal. They're priced about the same, so that also is green and thumbs up. The rocket battery has almost nothing to compare it to. It's a mini rocket that shoots 4 times. I feel like it's about the same value as a Titan mortar. I like it. I fielded it. I play with it. I don't think 290 is too expensive. So give it a try. I almost always have things to shoot at. Knocking a few wounds off big Griblies as they start thundering towards me is always a good idea. So there's definitely room in my army for a rocket battery. I'm throwing a Vassal Slingshot in because while it's technically not infernal artillery, it is a shooty weapon. It's almost exactly the same as a Goblin Skewerer. The Goblin Skewerer is only 90 points, but it's lacking the ability to drop oil tokens on enemies the way a Vassal Slingshot does. Is that worth 35 points? I'm not sure, but I really like the Vassal Slingshot, and I think 125 points is pretty darn reasonable, so it is also a green and gets an okay from me. Here is another unit that's almost impossible to price well because there's nothing to compare it to. I think this unit was actually created, if I remember correctly, as one of the two new units the Infernal Dwarves got when they were designing their books. It has a lot of really cool rules, but suffice to say, if to skip reading them all out, it's really only good for shooting units. It doesn't benefit close combat units very much at all. It adds ranks, but it takes away combat power, etc., etc. It's really only good for shooting units. It's good for both blunderbusses, and it's good for Flintlock Axes if you want to pay the price for Flintlock Axes. It's terrific for mages. Being able to stand way up high and cast spells down on your tiny, tiny enemies far below you is great. The thing has a crush attack. No expensive character wants to go face a crush attack. The potential of it doing damage is just too high. But giving your mage a crush attack, a potion of strength, so it's got essentially 2 crush attacks, will in theory scare away any reasonable valuable character. It's got enough toughness and hit points that nobody's probably going to kill it in one turn. So the potential of getting 2 crush attacks is pretty scary. You would think at least one of them is going to hit, and if somebody doesn't make their ward save or regen save, they could very easily die. Also, equally important, it has amazing modeling opportunities. This thing is very, very cool. There's lots of ways you can model it. It makes your unit just look bigger and awesomer on the table. I really like what they did with it. It's all there. It's so infernal dwarfy. It's great. The price did go up though. They want 290 points for it. I'm not convinced it's worth 290 points. I think it's closer to around 240 or 250. That would be my green price point to give it a thumbs up. I'm labeling it as orange because it's still good. People argue that it's required to make blunderbusses effective. It does make blunderbusses effective, and that's why I think you'll still see it on the table. But I think it's a little bit overpriced. If you want it in your army, it still might be worth the points. But yeah, I'll give it an orange. This is a unit that's there to do work. The Infernal Engine, our unbreakable, stompy, crushy, kicks things in the face engine that is scary to almost every army on the table. I compared it to the Empire of Sonstal Steam Tank, which is 500 points, which it's different, but it's similar. The Rock Crusher version, the close combat version of the Infernal Engine, is 470 points. Well, it doesn't have a cannon and some of that stuff, but it does 3d3 grind attacks, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's got decent armor. It's got a ton of hit points. It's really hard to get rid of. Nobody wants to be in base contact with this thing. Nobody definitely wants this thing corner clipping in, knowing that they can't get rid of it. It's solid in every way you can possibly think of it. You can put weapons on it, and so it's going to be costing some Fires of Industry points. It's a very cheap way to get a naphtha thrower. The range is still a little bit limited because it's using the Gunnery Team ranges. A 12-inch naphtha thrower on an Infernal Engine. I don't think you're going to be shooting it that often, but it is cheap to get it, so I'm giving that a green. The Titan Mortar, you can only move a little bit and shoot, and the range is still limited, so I'll give that one an orange. And a rocket battery, the range is not great, but oh my god, is it useful. So that one is also a green. My personal preference is the Rock Crusher. I've used it for years. It's very rarely failed me. Um, I've had it be just absolutely beat on, and sometimes just having it survive with even one wound is enough to just completely throw the enemy's plans into disarray and allow me to swing in with a counter charge. Uh, great modeling opportunities. This thing has the absolute rule of cool. So if you haven't tried it, definitely try it. But for those of you who already know it, it's got some good options. Try those as well. It gets greens for me all the way through, except for the Titan Mortar. That's only because of the limited range, which limits their movement, but otherwise a great unit entry. The Kadim Titan is probably the unit everyone wants to love more than any other unit entry in the entire book. It's our giant summoned lava flame demon supernal crammed into some armor. Um, Back in the heyday, it was the most badass thing on the table, and people lived in fear of it. It is not that anymore. It's still pretty scary, but it's not what it was, and it never will be, and that's okay. It's priced in at 530 points for the close combat version. The close combat version is scary. It can do a lot of work. It's great against a lot of stuff, actually, but not things with higher agility. Higher agility things like elves. Elvish spearmen will just walk right through it and take minimal casualties while they do it. Um, but against the right opponents, it's pretty darn effective. It went up in price. It's now 530 points. I think that's a little bit high. They could drop that down to what it was, and I'd grudgingly put it back on the table, but at 530 points, I think it's going to sit on my shelf for a while. I've got better options. Notably, the Infernal Engine will probably take this thing's place. The Kadim Titan is good, I just don't think it brings enough to justify the cost. You can give it a naphtha thrower, a Titan mortar, or a rocket battery for add-on prices to the base cost. Because it doesn't have either the range, or it limits the movement, or whatever, it takes away so much of its fighting capability. I do not like the shooting versions of this. I've seen a lot of people try it in their battle reports. Honestly, I've never tried it. The shooting weapons on a Kadim, I've never had any choices or any reason to try it. It doesn't appeal to me in any way. So I'm putting all of those as a big no, but other people have tried it, and I've heard regret in their voices. So the Walking Earthquake, maybe just because I love the model, it's a great centerpiece, and all that good stuff that goes along with that. The shooting versions, they don't have a lot of love for me. And last but not least is everyone's favorite, Citizen Giant. The Giants have befriended all of our armies, and the Citizen Giant is the one that lives in the lands of the Infernal Dwarves, and we put them to work. I think they're well priced. They're a fun, cheap monster that seems to suit just about every army that you put it into, because they're reliable. They have good damage potential. You got a couple of these on the table, and it looks like a football team. You gotta love these guys. We have some good options for ours. The Infernal Lash lets you put flaming attacks on the Giant or another unit. The number of times I've wanted to put flaming attacks on another unit and not gotten a spell off to give that unit flaming attacks is silly. I really like the Infernal Lash. A lot of people don't play with it. I find it stupidly useful, so I'm giving that one a green, a thumbs up, or an okay, however you want to look at it. The Tower Shield is good. The Giant has a 4+ armor save. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think we're the only Giant that has an armor save. The Tower Shield makes it a little bit better. It doesn't have the combat potential of the others, which I don't really like, but it's pretty hard to go wrong with a Giant in the first place. Giving one a shield is still a good idea, and it makes it even more durable giving it parry. Parry is probably the one weakness that it has, because it's got low weapon skill, and this gives it a lot more staying power. And if you're stomping things into the ground with your big giant feet, then so much the better. So it's a good value. It's just not my preferred. That's why it's orange. A club is always a solid choice. It's only a 5-point upgrade, so why the heck not? And Big Brother. If you're going to stomp, you might as well do maximize stomps. Citizen Giants are welcome in just about any army I've seen. Characters. This is the section I left for dead last. These are the guys who are leading our armies into battle, and we've got a lot of them. Infernal Dwarf characters are good, they're not great. You can keep them on the cheap side, or you can put piles and piles of points into them to just completely buff them out. The Overlord is only 210 base bare bones. Fully equipped, he's 480. And you can put a mount on top of that. The left-hand side is their base cost, right-hand side is fully kitted out, and I haven't included mounts. That's a completely separate topic. And I could do an entire video just about characters. You've got lots of different versions of Prophets. They start off real cheap, but if you fully kit out a Prophet of Ashrak, you're talking 900 points. That's almost a quarter of your army. That's crazy. One thing I'd like to say about our wizards. We are not Undying Dynasties. We're not an elf. We don't have a Quaddle in our pocket, and we definitely don't have a pile of Orison tokens like the new KOE book. We have an average, maybe below average magic phase. That's it. No matter how many points you pour into this, you're not going to get the super amazing, awesome magic phase other people get. So I like to run on the cheap side. I think the Vassal Conjurer is great because he's so cheap. The Lamassu has a really choice spell selection. I love him. I actually predict with the change to the new Arcane Compendium and Fireball becoming replicable, it would not surprise me a bit to see the return of the Scroll Caddy. For those of you who aren't old like me, a Scroll Caddy is a cheap bare bones wizard. He just has one or two spells, and he wrote the words Binding Scroll on an old dirty piece of toilet paper, and all he does is blast every game. For, what would that be, 160 points, Vassal Conjurer should probably get 2 fireballs off a turn. That's a better deal than I'm getting with my war machines. That's terrific. But if casting spells is fun, if you want to go that route and put points into a Prophet, by all means. You can get some really good benefits from a big magic phase. I just don't know if the return on investment is worth it. For the cost of a Vassal Conjurer and an Overlord, I could get one kitted out Prophet. Which is scarier? I don't know. That's something everybody has to make a choice for themselves, but you have lots of choices there whether you want to go lean or you want to go expensive. Whether you want a fighty character, you don't want a fighty character. I will make a quick comment about the Taurukh Commissioner. I've tried him many times. I wish I loved him more. I've tried really hard, but I don't find him worth the points. He's great if you put him in a unit of Taurukh Anointed and he gets his bodyguard rule, but if you make him killy, he's usually dead before he swings. If you make him defensive, I find that he can't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. With 4 attacks, he whiffs way too easy and suddenly your units are running. I don't like him. If other people get great mileage out of him, great, keep him in your list. Maybe you're playing him different than me or you've got better uses for him. I don't know. Maybe I've just had bad luck. He's not my favorite. He usually doesn't make an appearance. Love the Vizier, love the Lamassu. I've played with all the Prophets. The Overlord is one of my favorites. You've got lots of choices to mix and match, but I don't go into the point evaluations on these too deeply because you don't have anything to compare it to, really. If you want an Overlord, if you want a fighty character, that's what you're going to pay. If you want a mage with this ability, that's what you're going to pay. So design your list however you want. There's no wrong way to do it as long as you're having fun and you think it's effective and it suits your playstyle. That's great. You've got lots of options, but just keep in mind, cheaper is generally better if the better is not giving you as much return on investment as you think it should. And that's it. We've come to the end of the video. Those are my thoughts for prices and return on investment and how to spend points. I hope that this has given you guys some other tool, some other perspective, another way to look at lists or ways to consider units that you might not have considered before. This is not the only way to design a list, of course, but it's just one more way to hopefully get the most out of the points that you're putting into your list and make your list a little bit more effective. I know other people have, I'm not the first person to break down things by price. I haven't seen a video done on price in this way in a couple of years. That's why I thought I'd put this one together. So if anyone has any questions, by all means throw them at me. But I really like the way this points out things are definite go-tos and things that are definite stay away froms. The last thing I would like to say is just a huge thank you to all of our 9th Age volunteers. I would buy each of you a beer if I could. Without you, we absolutely wouldn't have a game. You provide all of us with hours and hours of imagination and fun and occupying our brains, and you bring people together. That's a pretty cool feeling. I hope you guys know how much you're appreciated. I hope you know that when we act like big babies on the forums, we're actually not mad at you guys. We think the work that you do is amazing, but we all have a lot of passion. We all have this as our hobby. All players have poured a lot of time and effort into their armies and their play styles. This is very important to each of us, but again, without the volunteers doing the work, we wouldn't have any game at all. So thank you very much. I hope I see each and every one of you at the tables at some point. I hope this video helps, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.